And we will now proceed to questions under the 5-minute rule. I am required to ask you this question. The committee has a history of the chair asking nominees to state on the record that they pledge to work with Congress and the committee in a cooperative manner. So I ask you, if confirmed, will you pledge to work collaboratively with this committee and provide thorough and timely responses to our requests for information as we work together to address important policy issues? Will you?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am. Let's move on then to some specific issues. I wonder if you've had a chance to look at the status of United States and European Union negotiations to establish a successor data transfer framework that overcomes the issues that led to the invalidation of the Privacy Shield last summer. We held a hearing on this in the last Congress on the invalidation of this EU-U.S. Privacy Shield framework. If confirmed, how do you plan to work with your counterparts in Europe on this issue and other issues to ensure that we have a data transfer framework that is workable? And how will you continue transatlantic data transfers in compliance with what we have now? Have you had a chance to look into this, Governor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you say, cross-border data transfers are vital to the interest of many American companies, and the Privacy Shield was particularly important for thousands of small and medium-sized businesses. As I understand it, the negotiations are going well, and should I be confirmed, it would be a top priority of mine to finish the negotiations swiftly and ensure that there's a successor agreement that protects the interest of American businesses and provides for that transfer of data.
Well, thank you very much. And I just wanted to highlight the importance of that by asking that as my first substantive question. Let's move to seafood, trade, restaurants, and competitiveness. Americans eat approximately 70% of their seafood in restaurants and other food service establishments. Restaurant closures during the COVID-19 crisis caused the demand for seafood to evaporate almost overnight. As a result, fisheries across the nation have reported up to a 90% drop in sales in 2020. My Restaurants Act, which is a bipartisan act, would have temporarily established and provided funding for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. Since Americans eat 70% of their seafood in restaurants, this bill would also help the seafood industry recover. And at this point, I offer into the record at this point an op-ed in today's Wall Street Journal, Closing Time for Bars and Restaurants, by Robert St. John, a prominent restaurateur in the state of Mississippi, and without objection, it will be added into the record at this point. So let me ask you, Governor, since 70% of Americans eat their seafood in restaurants, from the perspective of your region, what do you expect to be the lasting impacts of this terrible crisis on the seafood industry? And what will it take for the seafood and the restaurant industry to recover?
Thank you for that question. I know from our previous discussions, this is a very important topic for you, as it is for me. As Senator Whitehouse said, I am the governor of the ocean state. Thousands of Rhode Islanders make their living as commercial fishermen, and both they and restaurants have been really devastated during this pandemic. If confirmed as Commerce Secretary, I would look forward to working very closely with you and your colleagues to come up with bold and creative solutions, not only to help our fishermen, but also our restaurants, and for that matter, the entire hospitality industry, because I assess the impacts to be quite longstanding unless we take bold action.
These are two terribly threatened industries that are vital to our economy. Thank you, Governor Raimondo. Senator Cantwell, for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor, again, congratulations on your nomination. And I think you're aware of how broad the committee is in it. I mean, the department is in its oversight of science issues. So I wanted to, the chairman asked you a pretty broad question at the beginning, which was important to do with collaboration. It's surprising how often that doesn't happen sometimes, so it's very good to clarify. But also want to clarify this issue as it relates to science and data. Do you oppose any censorship of scientific data and information coming out of the Department of Commerce?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. And will you work with us to help restore the confidence in that science and data information and investment in it for the future?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. A couple of specific issues. One that I mentioned in my opening statement, and as we're talking about seafood and the fishing economy, salmon is particularly important to the Pacific Northwest. And one of the issues regarding salmon that I think, as we talk about infrastructure investment moving forward, that is all sorts of transportation infrastructure, we're a coastal state with a lot of transportation infrastructure and moving of products. But keeping salmon habitat and restoration in a robust state is very critical to keeping salmon. So will you work with us on a more targeted, larger scale investment in stormwater restoration and in building critical habitat for everything from oyster reefs to eel and seagrass and critical habitat? I'm sure this is, again, I think there's a dozen or so members of this committee that probably have similar problems in their states. But would you work with us to increase the amount of investment and targeted return from that investment?
Yes, I would very much look forward to working with you and other members of the committee. Again, as I said, I have come to understand from my discussions with you these past couple of weeks how important the salmon stock is and the fishing industry in general is to your state, and I would absolutely look forward to working with you on that issue.
Well, I guess I would call it salmon infrastructure, and that is that as we grow transportation infrastructure, which we also desperately need in the Pacific Northwest, we grow salmon infrastructure, which is that habitat and stormwater restoration, which practically every community in my state would tell you that they need if we're going to do a better job of protecting salmon. The same kind of scientific and data information is also needed for our orca whale population and preserving them. So one of the things that they have issue with right now, which NOAA has basically said we need to do something about noise as it relates to the orca population. So I hope that you will work with us to implement something that is a process for our shipping and Coast Guard and others to work on a mitigation plan for the orca whale population.
Yes, I would be excited to do that. I will say here as governor, I have a record of investing in stormwater, investing in resiliency, investing in adaptation, and would certainly look forward to doing that with you and members of the committee.
Thank you. And then lastly, stock assessments. We believe in good fisheries management policy, and key to that is stock assessments. And so I hope you'll work with us on increasing the amount of dollars that go into the science behind stock assessments so we can make good management plans.
Yes, again, absolutely. I plan to lead with science and lead with data. I know stock assessments are vital and also very detailed, and I absolutely will look forward to working with you on that.
Thank you. And on the larger issue of science and data, as I mentioned in my opening statement, as it relates to weather, do you think the United States should be a world leader in weather and data forecasting information? I say I'm not necessarily trying to be competitive with another nation. It's just the amount of times that we hear, our news broadcasters say, well, this is the forecast, and then this is the European forecast. And they are using supercomputing time to get more out of this. This weather data is so critical for us as it relates to, as I said, aviation, maritime, space issues, agriculture issues. So will you work with us to make sure the United States has the state-of-the-art technology when it comes to weather forecasting and weather information?
Yes, I think, and we had the opportunity to visit about this last week, I applaud your leadership on it. I think that America's National Weather Service should be the gold standard. And should I be confirmed, I will work with you to make sure that that is the case.
Thank you. I see my time's expired, Mr. Chairman. I would just say that I'm going to count on the governor to work with us. Her workforce strategy in real Rhode Island jobs, I think, is, that particularly for underserved communities and minority business communities, something we need to look at and how we can elevate that to a national level. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. Senator Thune.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor Raimondo, congratulations on your nomination. And let me just start by saying that, as I'm sure you are aware, in December, Congress allocated funds to NTIA to oversee a broadband grant program to connect underserved areas. It is vitally important that we close the digital divide in states like South Dakota and across America. However, the effectiveness of NTIA administering such a program is concerning given its history awarding broadband grants provided by the 2009 stimulus. Under the Obama-Biden administration, GAO concluded that NTIA had faced a number of challenges from staffing to adequate data on broadband availability, resulting in a largely ineffective program at the taxpayer's expense. What steps would you take to correct the mistakes of the past, and will you commit to me that NTIA will set up this program in a way that this new money only goes to areas that are completely unserved?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. First, let me say that as a governor of a state and having led through COVID, I have seen the truly devastating effects of that lack of broadband can have on people. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. It's how children can have their classes. It's how people can do telehealth and visit a doctor. It's how you can sign up to get a vaccine. So you have my strong commitment to work closely with you and other members of this committee to make sure that NTIA has strong leadership, and that we execute on those grants as expeditiously as possible, and with an eye towards making sure that everyone, tribal lands, rural, folks who live in a mountain range, has access to broadband, which is absolutely necessary. I will also say, this is an area where I hope we can have bipartisan agreement. I have heard from my Republican governor colleagues and Democratic governor colleagues all over the country saying, we need help on this. And so should I have the honor of serving as Commerce Secretary, I commit this will be a very top priority the minute I get into the job.
Thank you. Congress established a clear division of responsibility for spectrum management. The FCC is responsible for commercial spectrum, NTIA is responsible for federal government spectrum, and there have been a number of instances in the past when the FCC and NTIA's roles have come into conflict. How can we ensure that the FCC and NTIA work in partnership to address spectrum management issues that impact both federal and commercial entities, and do you support freeing up additional spectrum held by the federal government to support the needs of next-generation wireless services?
Thank you for this question, and it's a topic that I had the opportunity to talk to a number of members of the committee on. Again, it gets back to having a strong NTIA with strong leadership, particularly as it relates to 5G. The race is on for 5G, and I want America to win and lead, and that requires spectrum. So yes, I do support finding additional publicly owned spectrum. And I think what we need to do, and the President has been clear, is we need to step back and have a national strategy on spectrum and look to make spectrum available from public and commercial uses so that we can move forward on broadband and 5G. And I commit to working with you on that and having leadership in the NTIA to do that.
Thank you. The livelihoods of farmers and ranchers in my state often depend on forecasting accuracy, so it's important that we find innovative ways to improve NOAA's capabilities when it comes to predicting weather. In last Congress, Senator Schatz and I introduced a bill called the Learning Excellence and Good Examples from New Developers, or LEGEND Act, got to have an acronym around here, which makes NOAA's current and future operational forecast models more accessible to outside experts, including scientists and engineers and academia, who can provide new insights to improve existing forecasting models. Do you believe it is important for NOAA to incorporate innovative approaches to weather forecasting from outside stakeholders?
Yes, I do. As I said to Senator Cantwell, the National Weather Service should be the gold standard. And by the way, I have a strong track record of embracing innovation and technology throughout my public and private sector career. So yes, I think we ought to be forward-leaning and embrace science and technology and innovation so we have the best there is to offer.
And would you commit to working with us to move that act through Congress, that legislation?
I will commit to working with you, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Thune. Governor, let me just interject that Senator Thune has raised a very good point with regard to NTIA and FCC, and it is going to be important that we have a secretary that is committed to following the statute on the bifurcated system of managing spectrum with the NTIA representing the spectrum needs of federal agencies. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Governor. Thank you for being here. And I have to say that those two introductions by your senators, we hear a lot of introductions, but they were incredibly heartfelt and a tribute to you. And I would also add that my own governor, Tim Walz, is a big fan of yours, and that goes a long way. So your experience with economic development, your private sector and public sector experience, I think it's going to be an amazing combination for this job. So thank you very much for being willing to serve. I had a question. You and I talked about this when we met on travel and tourism, and I noted that Senator Blunt and I, along with several other senators, including Schatz, Cortez Masto, have worked on tourism. And the Brand USA bill, where Senator Blunt and I have led for years now, is a public-private partnership that promotes international tourism throughout the U.S., supporting more than 51,000 jobs a year. And I just like your commitment that you will support that and do all that you can to continue to support the tourism industry.
Yes, thank you, Senator, and thank you for your time yesterday. And thank you for your leadership on tourism. I know you've been a leader on this issue for a long time. I hail from a state where tourism is a significant part of our economy, and I have seen firsthand over these past 10 months just how crippling the COVID pandemic has been to the businesses of tourism-dependent businesses. So, yes, I look forward to working with you and your colleagues, really leaning into Brand USA and being as bold and creative as we can to encourage people to come to our country, to fly, to stay in hotels. Obviously, I think President Biden's leadership around COVID is vital, and once folks are vaccinated and feel more comfortable, absolutely, we will work together on this issue. It's a lot of American jobs.
Thank you. And one thing we didn't talk about as much, and I wish I had, and I can talk to you about it later, and given your experience with venture capital investment and the like, I think you could be such a big advocate for this, is that a bill that I have called the New Business Preservation Act focuses, we worked with Steve Case and other people on this, focuses on incubating and developing Silicon Valley type areas all over the country, that it shouldn't just be one area that gets all this investment, as good as that is, and that we need to spread it around and create other hubs of investment. And what the bill does is it authorizes states to make equity investments in new businesses alongside venture capital companies. They wouldn't actually be making the decisions or funding it directly. But I hope you'll be willing to look at that and look at that as well as skills investment. I think your experience in Rhode Island and what the work you've done with getting more people jobs would be really helpful. I think it was Tyler Perry who once said, your beginning shouldn't dictate your destiny. And certainly after this pandemic and through this pandemic, we're going to have a lot of work that must be done. I know Senator Cantwell has been such a leader on this, on skills reinvestment, as well as looking at our economy more globally about where we can invest in areas of the country to encourage more hubs of innovation.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, of course, I will look forward to working with you and all of your colleagues. I would say I am deeply committed to making sure that all Americans in every community have an opportunity to have the skills they need to get a good job. And it is true that most venture capital is highly concentrated in 5 or 6 communities around America, but those communities don't corner the market on great ideas or entrepreneurs. And so I will very much look forward to working with you to provide opportunity to all Americans.
Thank you. Last question. With 95% of the world's potential customers living outside of our borders, it's important more than ever that we ensure that our businesses and farmers, as reference to Senator Thune, we share a border, are able to capitalize on opportunities in these markets. And I'm a strong supporter of the U.S. Commercial Service, which, as you know, is the export division of the Department's International Trade Administration, which handles trade promotion, has trade professionals in over 100 U.S. cities, including my own, and has a presence in more than 70 countries. And during the Obama administration, there was a lot of focus on this. And I think we need to do even more as we move forward on exports. What's your plans to improve the U.S. Commercial Service Program, particularly for businesses based in rural areas?
So first, I agree with you. Secondly, I know this is an important area for you, and I appreciate your leadership. Exports equal growth, equal more jobs. So I intend to be very aggressive, should I be confirmed, to make sure that the Department of Commerce is accessible to all businesses, particularly small, medium-sized businesses, farmers, rurally located businesses. They ought to have access to the tools in the Department of Commerce to help them improve their exports. And so I will be very focused on that.
Very good. And I'll put on the record, Mr. Chairman, questions about broadband as well as steel dumping, something I discussed with the governor yesterday. So
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Senator Blunt.
Thank you, Chairman. Governor, I'm sorry we haven't had a chance to visit yet, but look forward to an opportunity to do that. Let's go right to the exports issue that you and Senator Klobuchar just talked about. I think one of the disadvantages we've created for ourselves in the recent years are our tariffs on a number of things, but particularly steel and aluminum. In my state, we make beer cans and bass boats and automobiles and pickup trucks, and I think we're disadvantaged.
Excuse me, Senator,
frankly.
don't you also make airplanes?
And airplanes, exactly, and even Boeing airplanes, as a matter of fact.
Don't take that out of his
Senator
time.
Cantwell. But all of those things, and well beyond, as Senator Cantwell just pointed out, well beyond any list I would come up with, President Biden said he would conduct a review of all existing tariffs. I'm personally concerned about the 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum, and wonder if you have any view on that issue.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. I will say that here in Rhode Island, we make submarines and electric boat who are consumers of steel and aluminum, and so I hear you, and I appreciate your advocacy. Having said that, China has clearly behaved in ways that are anti-competitive, dumping cheap steel and aluminum into America, which hurts American workers and hurts the ability of our companies to compete. So should I be confirmed, I plan to be very aggressive to help Americans compete against the unfair practices of China. I will say the president has been clear. We need to step back, review broadly our policies, trade policies as it relates to China, consult with our allies, and I will assure you that I will certainly listen to you, engage stakeholders, listen to the manufacturers in your state, and take their needs into account. I also understand there's an exclusions process, and I will also commit to you for consuming industries, and I will commit to you to ensure that that exclusions process is swift, fair, objective, and helps to balance the competing interests.
Well, I do think, and I'm sure you well understand that the dumping, the tariffs that are based on that are clearly tariffs that we should impose, and we shouldn't tolerate dumping. At the same time, we shouldn't use national security as just an excuse to have a tariff, and you're not suggesting we should, but anything you do on that front doesn't take away the tools you have from a country like China that may be dumping steel and aluminum, and I hope you'll look at that way. I was going to mention Brand USA, and Senator Klobuchar and I mentioned we have worked closely on that for a long time. It's a program that is working, was working obviously a lot better when people were traveling, but to be sure that we're continuing to project states like Minnesota and Missouri and Rhode Island that may not have their own budget that would allow them to appeal to foreign travelers the way Brand USA has. It's working. It's a great partnership. I think we've gone through all of the challenges of a new program and see that program working a little better all the time. And you've already addressed that. Generally, the hospitality industry, travel, tourism, hospitality has been hurt as badly as any industry in this pandemic. And being sure when we establish barriers, like some concern right now that maybe everybody who'd travel to the United States should have had a vaccine or have some level of testing, I hope we really move forward looking at those issues with an understanding of how important that is to our economy. We clearly want to win the fight against the virus, but we don't want to lose the fight for a re-emerging economy in those areas. Have you had any thoughts on whether there should be barriers on travel that the Commerce Department would be involved in?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I would say this is something that I have lived every day since COVID, because being governor, you're in the position of wanting to protect people from COVID, but also make sure that you maintain as much of an economy as possible. The President Biden has a fantastic team leading on COVID, and I have confidence in their ability to do that. I will simply say to you, I hear you, and I feel we need to be very bold, aggressive, and creative to help the tourism and hospitality industry in light of the situation they're in.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Chairman. I may have some questions for the record, but I've used up my time.
Thank you, Senator Blunt. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to the committee, and thank you for your willingness to continue your public service, Governor. I am really admiring and grateful of your record on environmental preservation, particularly your commitment, as you and I discussed, to the idea of a Blue New Deal. I think a phrase originated by Senator Warren, but as the ocean state and our neighbor to Connecticut, I know that you're committed to our oceans and to the health of that treasure that we share. And in that connection, I was very gratified to see that President Biden has signed an executive order to reinstate the protections afforded by the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Marine National Monument last week. That's a cause that I championed. President Obama signed the order establishing it President Trump reversed it, and now, fortunately, President Biden has reinstated it. And I understand that he is contemplating and will soon sign an executive order to establish a goal to conserve 30% of all United States lands, freshwaters, and oceans by 2030, which is known as 30 by 30. Thank you for your support of that measure as well. As you know, the quotas for fishing in our respective waters are outdated, and I would like your commitment that you'll be working with me to get the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission and relevant fishery managers to update the outdated quotas for fishing, which affects the fishing industry in our respective states. As you know, those quotas have been severely outdated for years, and they force many of our boats to throw back fish that are dead anyway, and the quotas should be updated to enable them to keep some of that produce.
Thank you, and I know this is a vitally important area for you. You've brought it up with me a few times, and I definitely look forward to working with you on this. I will say that I understand, you know, again, being the governor of the ocean state, 4,000 or 5,000 people make a living fishing here. Having quotas, stock assessments, accurate, based on data, science, is important, and I'll prioritize it. That's how I'll lead, and I look forward to a dialogue with you on this.
Thank you. I know, as you're in light of your background, both in the private sector and now as governor, you're very well aware of the disparate impact the pandemic has had on minority-owned businesses. In fact, according to one report released by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, 41% of Black-owned businesses, 32% of Latinx-owned businesses have gone under. What would be the role, what should be the role of the Minority Business Development Agency to help vulnerable and hopefully thriving minority-owned businesses?
Yes, thank you. COVID has shined a light on the inequities in our economy, and the president has been very clear we're going to build back better and more equitably, and I strongly support that. I believe MBDA can play a vital role in that. Certainly, I have a lot of experience as governor in place-based economic development. I'm very proud of the fact that more than half of the people who have participated in our job training and placement effort post-COVID are women and people of color. So you have my commitment to lead in this area and to use the MBTA as a very important player in the rebuild effort.
Thank you. Finally, let me ask you about broadband connectivity. As you know, many parts of our country, including Rhode Island and Connecticut, are afflicted with the homework gap. The lack of connectivity is a severe barrier to young people trying to stay current, and that's another problem that's been highlighted by the pandemic. The Census's ACS program is one of the most reliable sources of information about the homework gap, and I would appreciate your commitment that you will make as a priority the sources of information about the homework gap and the digital divide, which are so necessary to our closing that gap.
Yes, I will commit to prioritizing that and working with you on that.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Governor. It's a pleasure to see you here today, and I appreciated you taking time earlier to have a conversation with me. So it's an important job that you've put your name forward to take on. And again, I thank you for your willingness to serve. I'm interested in talking more with you on technology and competitiveness. Just yesterday, the Center for Data Innovation report assessed our country's artificial intelligence capabilities as being in a dead heat with China's. At the end of 2020, two bills that I led to advance U.S. policy on the Internet of Things and emerging technology both passed into law. The first is the DIGIT Act, which I worked on with Senator Schatz to ensure that the U.S. remains competitive on the development and deployment of IoT. This could add considerable value to our economy, especially in transportation, manufacturing, agriculture, and also energy sectors. The bill, now law, directs the Secretary of Commerce to convene a public-private working group and a steering committee. If confirmed as Secretary, will you prioritize implementing the DIGIT Act's working group structures in accordance with that law?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for your time the other day. I enjoyed the discussion. The answer is yes. I will look forward to working with you on that. Whether it's artificial intelligence or 5G or blockchain, we are in competition, and it'll be my job, should I be confirmed, to make sure that Americans can compete and get those jobs. And so convening that sort of a group would be absolutely a priority for me, working with you.
Great. Secondly, I led the Senate companion to the American Compete Act with Senator Sinema. The legislation directs the Commerce Department to complete a series of studies on emerging technologies. These studies will inform Congress on key sectors of emerging tech, which have major consequences for our country's economic success. The Secretary of Commerce plays an important part in conducting those studies in the Compete Act. Will you commit to ensuring that, if confirmed, the Secretary's office will take a lead role in fulfilling this responsibility?
Thank you, Senator, for that. And yes, I will commit to working with you on that, focusing on that, and prioritizing it.
Thank you. During our call last week, we talked about how NOAA works closely with the University of Nebraska on two important programs, the High Plains Regional Climate Center and the National Drought Mitigation Center. Both of these programs provide important information on the climate across the country. If confirmed, will you work with me to ensure that NOAA continues to support and coordinate with UNL on these programs?
So thank you for bringing that up again. I know this is a priority of yours because you brought it up with me before, and I would look forward to working with you. I will say here in my home state, NOAA has a significant presence and also works with our University of Rhode Island to great effect and to create innovation and jobs. So I will look forward to supporting you on that.
Great. I appreciated speaking with you about the Commerce Department's recent actions against threats from China before this hearing. Would you further explain your perspective on the national security risks regarding the Chinese equipment suppliers to our communication networks, particularly with regard to Huawei?
Yes, thank you. So national security has to come first, obviously, and with respect to 5G, as we spoke about in your office, there's an opportunity to move forward in 5G and create great innovation and jobs. But we can't have the Chinese or really anyone having a backdoor into our network and compromising in any way our national or economic security. And so as Commerce Secretary, should I be confirmed, I will use the full toolkit at my disposal to the fullest extent possible to protect Americans and our network from Chinese interference or any kind of backdoor influence into our network. And that's Huawei, ZTE, or any other company.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your strong firmness on this issue because it is a national security issue. We need, I think, to have a strong voice when we discuss these issues, and we need to follow up with strength as well. So I thank you for that firmness and look forward to working with you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Schatz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Governor, thank you for the conversation yesterday. You mentioned in your testimony that Commerce has the tools and expertise to help communities and businesses address climate risk. Can you just talk about your top 2 or 3 priorities under existing statute?
Thank you and good morning. There are a number of ways that Commerce could influence climate, but most principally through NOAA. As I said, some of the best scientists around atmospherics and oceans are at NOAA and are at the department. So I would really look forward primarily through NOAA to address the climate issues posed by warming oceans, ocean debris, rising tides, the issues around fisheries and climate, to lead again with science and rely on the experts in the department. I think there's a very big role for NOAA to play in the blue economy, but also as we meet the challenges of climate.
Great, and I just encourage you, especially given what happened with the previous regime, to lock in to whatever extent possible a scientific integrity policy which doesn't swing back and forth depending on who the president may be. I want to pivot to the census, and I think I know the answer to this question, but I think it's important for the record. Are you going to give the Census Bureau adequate time to compile and review apportionment and redistricting data?
Yes, like you, I know from yesterday's conversation, I believe that we need to take the politics out of the census and we need to rely on the experts. The experts and statisticians in the Census Bureau are top-notch, so I, once confirmed, intend to rely on them. And if they advise that more time is necessary, then I'm going to follow the lead of their expertise.
Thank you. We briefly spoke yesterday about the potential for aquaculture. I know your home state has a growing aquaculture industry, and Senator Wicker and I have legislation along those lines. As Secretary, will you work with Senator Wicker and myself and other members of the committee to enact and implement bipartisan legislation to develop a responsible national aquaculture framework?
I would embrace that opportunity to work with you and your other colleagues. We here have used aquaculture successfully for oysters. I know there are different issues as it relates to finfish, but yes, I would look forward to working with you.
Great, and you talked a little bit about place-based economic development. Senator Thune and I authored, and it was signed into law, a law called the Native Act, which was bipartisan, and it is designed to strengthen native tourism and empower local communities to tell their own story. You know, Brand USA is important, destination marketing is important, but a lot of the best opportunities for economic development are for small towns and cities and tribes and native communities to tell their own story, and increasingly that's what tourists want. The unfortunate fact is that even though the bill was enacted, it was never implemented by the previous Commerce Department Secretary, and I would like your commitment simply to implement the law and to consult with us as we go along.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. And finally, as you know, Congress allocated $1 billion to NTIA to fund broadband on tribal lands. Do you commit to establishing a fast and fair review process so that this money can be immediately deployed to help unconnected students and individuals during this pandemic?
I commit to you and all of your colleagues, because a number of you have brought it up, to move that as expeditiously, transparently, and effectively as possible. I do believe that broadband is a life-saving, and too many people living in rural and tribal lands don't have it. So yes, I will prioritize it and get going quickly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Schott. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor, congratulations on your nomination. Welcome. In recent years, the United States has successfully used economic pressure to prevent the People's Republic of China from exploiting American technology to carry out human rights abuses. This is an area the previous administration was particularly active in. Governor, should you be confirmed, can you please describe the role you envision for the Department of Commerce in these efforts, especially as that role relates to export and import controls?
Yes, thank you. So, as I said earlier, China's actions have been anti-competitive, hurtful to American workers and businesses, coercive, and as you point out, you know, they're culpable for atrocious human rights abuses. So whether it's the entities list or tariffs or countervailing duties, I intend to use all those tools to the fullest extent possible to level the playing field for the American worker. I believe in free trade, but fair trade. Americans can compete if the rules are fair and the playing field is level. And I believe my job, should I be confirmed, is to increase the competitiveness for the American worker and companies, especially small businesses. President Biden has said that we're going to step back and have a whole of government approach as it relates to the threat of China. And of course, I will play my role on that team.
Well, as you noted, the Department of Commerce maintains the entity list, which is foreign parties that engage in activities contrary to U.S. national security. And in 2019, I led an effort to add to that list companies that the Chinese Communist Party has used to carry out their surveillance campaigns of Uyghurs and other oppressive activities. And I introduced legislation mandating that some of those companies be listed, the Tiananmen Act. And in the fall of 2019 and in 2020, the Trump administration did so, adding batches of Chinese technology companies to the entities list. Can you commit, if confirmed, that those companies will remain on the BIS entities list?
I will commit to working with you on that, and I certainly agree with you that the entities list is a powerful tool in the Commerce Secretary's toolkit to shore up American national security.
Well, let me ask about Huawei in particular. Can you commit that Huawei will remain on the list?
I will commit that once, should I be confirmed and I am there, I will review the policy, consult with you, consult with industry, consult with our allies, and make an assessment as to what's best for American national and economic security.
Well, I will say there's chatter in Washington that the Biden administration is contemplating going easy on China and removing companies from the entities list. I certainly hope that does not happen, because I think that would be profoundly contrary to the national security interest of the United States. The Department of Commerce's mandate and its mission is to create conditions for economic growth and opportunity. The Department of Commerce's job is to advocate for commerce, to advocate for jobs. I will say I am certainly concerned that in the Biden administration, the Commerce Department will not have that as its priority. President Biden has named you as a member of the interagency working group on the social cost of greenhouse gases. In what federal statute does the Department of Commerce find legal authority to promulgate rules concerning greenhouse gases?
That is a question I am not certain of, but I will tell you that if President Biden asks me to serve on his team in a capacity to help American workers compete or to fight climate change, then I obviously will be a key player on that team.
So, Governor, your current job as governor of Rhode Island, as you know, in 2019, CNBC did its annual rankings of the states that are friendly to business, and the state of Rhode Island came out 50th, dead last, the worst state in the union for businesses. Given that record, how are the American people, what reassurances can you give the American people that your performance at commerce would be better than the state of Rhode Island has done in terms of creating an environment where jobs are plentiful?
When I ran for governor, Rhode Island had the highest unemployment rate in the country. And just prior to COVID, we had the lowest unemployment rate in our state's history and the most jobs in our state's history. When I ran, we were 50 out of 50 on Business Insider's ranking, and a couple years into my term, we were 26th. So my record is clear that we have created thousands of jobs for the people of Rhode Island, and I would look forward to fighting for the American worker should I be confirmed.
Okay, and final question, should you be confirmed? Last week, President Biden signed an executive order canceling the Keystone Pipeline, destroying 11,000 jobs, including 8,000 union jobs. If you were confirmed as Secretary of Commerce, what would you say to those 11,000 construction workers whose jobs have been destroyed by the stroke of a pen, and what would you say to them?
I would say we're going to get you to work. I would say that climate change is a threat to all of us. And that we will make sure that you have jobs, that you have the skills you need to have a job. And by the way, as we meet the needs of climate change, there will be many more jobs created, good paying jobs, union jobs. And should I be the Commerce Secretary, I will fight every single day for every American to have a decent paying job and a chance to compete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. Senator Markey, we have heard an awful lot from New England already today. Would you like to just yield back your time?
Well, this is it's a great day, Mr. Chairman. The Bay State and the Ocean State, we agree on a lot of issues, and we're small in numbers, but we're mighty on policies. And Governor Raimondo is a perfect example of someone who is just an incredible leader on issues that make her state a cutting edge in just so many areas. And I'd like to, if I could, begin, Governor, by taking two subjects I usually raise in committees with Senator Wicker, and that's telecommunications and climate change. And we're going to need programs and I'm going to be introducing legislation towards this effect in order to protect our telecommunications networks, our fiber optic networks, and harden them against the impact of climate change. So I'm asking you whether or not you would work with me towards the goal of putting together the programs that will help to ensure that that infrastructure gets protected from the inevitability of the climate change that is already built into our atmosphere.
It would be my honor to work with you. I have long admired your leadership in this area, and yes, I would look forward to that.
Thank you. In the most recent relief bill, the one that we passed right at the end of 2020, we were able to include $300 million for relief for the fishing industry, something that you are very familiar with. So I would love to hear your views on how quickly, expeditiously that funding can get out into the hands of the fishing industry in all of its various manifestations.
Thank you, Senator. I know you're very committed to the fishermen in your state. We have talked about it, and like you, I come from a state with thousands of fishermen. Should I be confirmed, I will assess that very quickly and make sure that it is distributed as expeditiously as possible. The fishermen are struggling, like so many others right now, and we need to do our best to get the money out the door quickly and effectively and transparently.
Thank you. And NOAA is just such a critical agency in terms of protecting our country against the impact of climate change. And I have a number of pieces of legislation, one with Senator Sullivan, the Ocean Research Act, to designate funding for critical research on ocean acidification. I have a Climate Change Education Act so that NOAA could study and dispense grants on key climate, health, and jobs-related issues. So would you, if confirmed, would you work with me on those issues on climate, health, and marine science priorities?
Yes, I would look forward to working with you.
No, thank you. Much appreciated. And the nation's first federal fisheries lab was established at Woods Hole, Massachusetts in 1871, 150 years ago. The Northeast Fisheries Science Center is an invaluable part of Massachusetts fishery and science community. So, Governor, would you commit that NOAA Northeast Fisheries Science Center will remain in Massachusetts?
Senator, I deeply admire your advocacy on this issue. I think you've brought it up with me every time we've spoken. And should I be confirmed, I will commit to look into that and work with you on it.
Well, no, I thank you for that. And again, I would like to ask you to come and visit at Woods Hole so that we can show you the incredible work that is being done right there on all these fishery issues as well. And I'd also ask you, Governor, if you would consider adding additional NOAA facilities and capacity in New Bedford and in other areas of Massachusetts in order to provide the on-the-ground expertise on fishing, offshore wind, and other issues important to Massachusetts communities.
I would look forward to coming to Woods Hole and to New Bedford and exploring that with you.
No, and I appreciate that very much. Obviously, our workers, our fishermen have been under enormous stress over this past year and before, and so I look forward to working with you. I think you're going to be a great Secretary of Commerce. You bring just an incredible background that has prepared you for this moment in our country's history. So I thank you for your service to Rhode Island, but to our country in the years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Markey. Senator Moran.
Chairman Wicker, thank you. Governor Raimondo, thank you for being with us today, and thank you for the conversation we've had recently. Let me start with an issue for me as an appropriator. As we discussed yesterday, I chair the subcommittee on appropriations that funds the Department of Commerce. We raised with you yesterday, and I want to do so again today, a couple of large mission, critical, high-cost items within the Department of Commerce's budget. Two of the department's largest bureaus, NOAA and NIST, are both facing crises as it relates to recapitalizing aging and, in some cases, obsolete infrastructure. I recently visited the NOAA Aircraft Operations Center, where I learned about the need to recapitalize the agency's fleet of Hurricane Hunter aircraft, an effort that will require more than $600 million in funding before 2024. Likewise, earlier this year, I visited the NIST campus in Boulder, Colorado, and the laboratories clearly are aging, and they are housing some of our nation's most premier scientists tasked with some of our country's most challenging issues in science and technology. So, unfortunately, the funding crisis for these capital costs are often not included in the department's budget or in those agencies' budgets request. It's difficult to take things out of everyday operations and put them into things that are necessary for long-term benefits. But I would ask you, if you will, include and prioritize in the department's budget request that we will see later this year, and commit to testifying before our subcommittee in regard to these and the other appropriation items.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for bringing this up as you did yesterday. So first, let me say I certainly concur that some of the finest scientists and mathematicians in America are at NIST and at the department, and they do deserve adequate facilities. And I will commit to looking into this and learning more, and certainly coming back to you should I be confirmed.
Governor, thank you. I raised also with you in our conversation something I wanted to raise again because I don't know that it will be mentioned by anyone else, and I wouldn't expect you to be terribly knowledgeable about this topic, but it's the topic of fertilizer, phosphate fertilizer that farmers use to grow crops. It's the second most important fertilizer behind nitrogen, and on February 8th, just a few days from now, Commerce is scheduled to make a final determination on countervailing duties on phosphate fertilizers from Morocco, which is one of our nation's largest suppliers. Since the CBD investigation began, the price for those fertilizers in the United States has increased approximately 25%. The higher prices are being passed on to farmers, increasing their input costs, and it comes at an always challenging time for farmers, and ultimately comes at a very challenging time for consumers. Governor, I need to highlight this issue and hope that in making a final determination on those duties on phosphate fertilizers, you will assure me that you will take into account the broad impact of those duties that they have on the agricultural economy, on input costs, and on the consumer. And I would ask you to consult. I have a conversation with nominee Governor Vilsack, Secretary Vilsack, to have this conversation as well, and I'm going to encourage him to visit with you about this issue before February the 8th. I need some reassurance that you understand the magnitude and challenge of this issue for everyday farmers and ranchers in this country.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for bringing it up. I know your passion for this, and I appreciate your advocacy on behalf of your constituents. Yes, as with all countervailing duties and tariffs, I understand the pain that some of these decisions can cause to farmers in your state, and I absolutely look forward to working with you and Secretary Vilsack. I look forward to a strong relationship with him generally as it relates to all export policies for agriculture and farmers and imports.
Two other items that I was intended to bring up have been brought up by others. I would highlight them again for you. The Privacy Shield also has a consequence for data privacy that Senator Blumenthal and I in particular have worked on. And also Senator Blunt raised this morning the issue of 232 tariffs, and I appreciate the conversation we had on those. Finally, I would say, Governor, you have prioritized everyone's request for things that you prioritize, and so I would finally ask you, will you prioritize my requests over the priorities of other members of this committee?
Don't thank him for that question.
That's probably one commitment I surely cannot make.